I've got 12:05. Should we get rolling? Guys in the back ready? Okay. So I'm going to talk about how we transformed from a business services outsourcing company into a data-driven enterprise, in case you haven't picked up on that from the slide. So who am I? My name is Kevin Good. I'm the Director of Platform Engineering at a company called Inmar. I've been in IT about 20 years now, and I would say most of that time has been spent in doing data analytics of some sort or another. I was working with databases that were terabyte plus back in the late 90s, and all the databases seem to keep getting bigger. A couple years ago, the leadership at my company said, we want to do analytics, we want to do big data because we've read that in CIO magazine and it sounds cool, so go figure out how we're going to go do big data. So that's been my focus for the last 3 or 4 years. So the agenda for today is I'm going to tell you a little bit about who Inmar is, our big data decision, our evaluation process, our current architecture, the kind of regulated data that we have to manage and some of the rules around it, and then we'll talk about some of the products that we have in production currently and what we have in our pipeline that we're working on right now. All right, so who is Inmar? We are a small company, or not so small company, in Winston-Salem, North Carolina. We've been in business for about 35 years now. We manage over $44 billion a year in commerce value, and what that means is that we're essentially kind of a financial transaction clearinghouse for coupon redemption, healthcare pharmacy claims, and reverse logistics. We've got 4,200 employees in 29 facilities across North America. We've got clients in 11 countries, 34 years of experience working with retailers, manufacturers, and health systems, and 25 clients in the Fortune 100. That's all the stuff marketing wanted me to say. So, to talk a little bit about those numbers and the $44 billion that we handle every year, our technology is embedded at over 100,000 retail locations with 9,000 manufacturers. We've been doing coupon processing the longest. And every year we process about 2.3 billion coupons. That is a mixture of paper and digital, and we're slowly seeing digital catch up to paper. We feel like that's where the industry's going. We process 700 million pharmacy claims every year and 525 million return goods. And so reverse logistics and return goods, the example that I usually kind of present for that is that if you go into your grocery store on Halloween, you see an aisle full of Halloween candy, and if you go back on November 1st, all that's gone and all the Christmas stuff is out. All that Halloween candy has to go somewhere, and it comes back to a company like us, and we count it, and we say this store sent in so many, and those stores will get credit. Some manufacturers will take it back, so we'll ship it to them. If not, we'll destroy it, or we'll try and sell it to Big Lots or Dollar General or liquidate it some other way. So if any data scientists are in the room, you've probably noticed that those numbers don't add up to the 3.7 billion transactions annually that we say we process. And that's because if you've ever dealt with the healthcare system and insurance, and I'm assuming that everybody has, that you know that you get a bill that initially from the hospital says you owe us $1 million, and then the insurance company says, well, we'll pay $10 of that, and then they go back and forth until there's eventually some kind of settlement. Well, the same thing happens with the pharmacy claims. So we figure that we see about 1.2 transactions per pharmacy claim, which should get pretty close to 3.7. Any questions about Inmar so far? All right. So we've been doing this for, like I said, 35 years, and we throw off a lot of data as we do all these tiny transactions. And we said, well, what do we do with all this data? Well, analytics. That was the answer from the corner office, is we've got to do analytics because that's what everybody does, and that's how we'll make a lot of money. So we had to pick a platform and then hire the expertise and build products. So we went out, we found started looking for a data scientist and started figuring out what we were going to build for our analytics platform. So currently in our shop on the data center floor, I've got SQL Server and MySQL and Postgres and iSeries and Informix and flat files and Ingress. Does anybody here know what Ingress is? Has anybody here actually seen it live in production? You want a job? Because I don't want to mess with it. So we have heterogeneous data for sure. So what we've tried in the past, over and over, we tried to build data marts in SQL Server where we would spend 6 to 8 months, gather requirements from the business, and they'd say, here's everything that we want to know. We'd go off, we'd build ETL, typical waterfall type of deal, and then we'd build an app that would go against the data mart, and then the business would look at it 8 months later and go, wow, that's really great, and then 2 weeks later they go, all right, we've answered all the questions we have out of that, now I want it to do all this other stuff. And we go, well, it doesn't do that because that's not how we built it. And then you'd go back and go through that process over and over. They couldn't really figure out what questions they really wanted to answer, and we figured that just really wasn't working for us. We tried building analysis services cubes, and I think one of our directors of technology was scared by a cube when he was a child, and then he said, no cubes, never again, we can't do cubes. They're also kind of a pain to build and maintain and refresh. We tried Cognos, we've tried a bunch of other stuff, and none of that had really seemed to work for us. So we started looking around at what else is out there and how are other people doing analytics and what should we consider. So we took a look at Netezza and Greenplum, SQL Server Parallel Data Warehouse, and Hadoop. So the guys from IBM came in and started pitching Netezza to us, and they said, it's great, you don't need DBAs, you don't need developers, it'll just go in your data center, it'll magically suck all the data out of all your systems, and you'll start doing analytics within the hour. And we said, wow, that sounds really amazing and really unbelievable. So then we started digging into their tech a little more. It really wasn't quite that panacea that they presented, and it was incredibly expensive. And they said, well, we just keep throwing hardware at it, and if it doesn't get what you want, we'll bring in another one of these bricks for a couple $1 million, and it'll be great. The more money you make, the more money we'll make. So that really wasn't the path that we wanted to go down. Greenplum came in and talked to us, and they were also really expensive and also had an appliance and said, just, you got to put this in and it'll be great. And they also had no real product roadmap. We said, we're not interested in your appliance right now. They came back about 3 months later and said, well, now we've added Hadoop. Does that make it better? We've got Hadoop in there, and plus we've got the analytics that we've always done, and we're going to add something else in a couple more months, and we don't know what it is yet, but it'll be great, whatever it is. And we said, no, that doesn't also sound very appealing to us. Then I think they got bought by EMC around then, and then got spit out as Pivotal, and yeah, they were just kind of all over the place, and they didn't really feel like a good partner for us. So then we talked to the Microsoft folks during our enterprise agreement renewal. They were pushing SQL Server Parallel Data Warehouse really, really hard. Again, I found that to be incredibly expensive, and the sales guy really annoyed me a lot. He came in and said, I met with your CEO, so I know exactly how your business operates, and this is exactly what you need, and here's the PowerPoint to prove it. And I said, well, that's why we typically don't let people in technology talk to the CEO, because he doesn't really know how things work down here. And then the guy said, well, I can put you in a quarter rack for a little under $1 million. And I said, well, I hope that that's like $900,000 under $1 million, because a quarter rack seems really expensive, especially knowing that most of that's going to be, enterprise edition, extremely expensive licenses. So we passed on that, and we took a look at Hadoop, and we said, you know what, the pricing looks pretty good. We can make a minimal investment, and we can see, is this really going to work for us? And it kind of had the architecture built into it that it could grow as we needed it to if we decided to move forward with it. So once we decided on Hadoop, we needed to figure out who it was that we were going to use. We talked to Cloudera. We talked to them a lot. Their training was fairly expensive. And And I asked them about any kind of break on that, and they said, nope, there's no breaks. We're the best in the industry. You don't want to get training from anybody else. They're all terrible. We're the best. The other thing that I didn't like about it is that their manager, that they tout as being kind of their big advantage, has some closed source software in there. So once you get that into your data center, you're kind of stuck with it. And you've got to pay them a license fee every year going forward, whether you really like their support or not. So that wasn't appealing to us. Again, Green Plum came back and said, hey, we'll cut you a really, really sweet deal on Hadoop now. And it was closed source, which I wasn't real thrilled with, but they were going to sell us a perpetual license. The price wasn't bad, but again, they were just all over the place on their strategy with no idea what they were going to be when they grew up. So we said that's, perpetual license for a company that may not exist next year, maybe not such a good deal. We talked to MapR, and again, they had a lot of closed source drivers, and just that was not really appealing to us. So then talked to the Hortonworks guys, and dug in pretty deep, found out that everything they have in there is completely open sourced, and I was pretty blunt with them, and I still am. I think I see Justin in the back of the room, and he can attest that I'm pretty blunt with him and tell him, I'll buy your support as long as there's value there. As soon as you're not providing the value, then we're going to drop it and go it on our own. So we expect you to be a good business partner and provide top quality support, or we don't have to have you. And so that's why we picked Hortonworks. We've been pretty happy with them so far. So then we started getting into the hardware, and we are probably 98% virtualized in our data center using Cisco UCS. So Cisco thought we were a slam dunk, and they started giving us some really terrible quotes, and I kept going back saying, no, this is what I'm looking for. I want, high storage density, low cost. You've got to do better than that. And they said, well, no, this is what you need. That's the quote we're going to give you. We're not going to revise it at all. So I said, all right, well, that's great. So we went and talked to Dell. Their pizza boxes were fairly cheap. We got them at about $4,500. Those boxes came with a 3-year warranty. They had 64 gigs of RAM, 8 cores, and 12 terabytes of raw storage. We ended up using VMguest for our primary and secondary name nodes so that we could get the high availability that we wanted in the name nodes. Didn't need to have them as data nodes, so we didn't need to allocate a lot of expensive SAN storage. So that worked out pretty good for us. So we basically got 10 physical data nodes for about $4,500, which gave me 640 gigs of RAM, 80 cores, and 120 terabytes of storage. When I looked at just the licensing alone for the 80 cores for SQL Server Parallel Data Warehouse, it was at least 4 times that amount with no hardware. So, as I said, we do a lot with healthcare and digital promotions, so we have a lot of sensitive data and figured, well, we need to encrypt this stuff, protect ourselves. So we first started to talk to Gazang, and they sounded interesting. They offered an encryption at volume level, which would let us put the data in there, but not necessarily let us log the data or have the data obfuscated as a data scientist was viewing it. So we would have accomplished the data encrypted at rest part of it, of regulations, and we could have covered the data encrypted in transit by turning on SSL, but we wouldn't have had the built-in logging mechanism that we needed for HIPAA regulations to say, Jeff Klaus saw this data at this date and time. So we passed on them, called data guys. They didn't return most of my calls, so we passed on them. Oddly enough, I've had more calls from them last week than I did the entire time we were looking for an encryption software. So then we talked to Voltage, which has been purchased by HP now, but they were really interesting. They came out of the credit card space and had created a couple of patents for format preserving encryption, which has anybody tried to encrypt data before without format preserving encryption? Nobody? Well, typically when you do that, you end up with a big blob or a big nasty var binary type data type. So you have to go and change all of your data schemas to now accommodate this data type that you didn't have before. The format preserving encryption let us encrypt strings as strings, and so we didn't have to change data schemas, and we could just encrypt the data, and our data scientists who knew the database schemas could go in and start looking at the data and start doing joins and do all the work that they needed to do without an enormous amount of work. So that was very appealing to us, and that's why we chose those guys to do our encryption. So, as I said, we have regulated data. We have two types of regulated data, sort of. We have EPHI, which covers any type of HIPAA data. It's electronic personal health information. And any access to non-obfuscated data must be logged. You, as a patient, have the right to go and ask any provider to show you who has accessed your data at any point in time, and then ask them why they accessed it. So that's a pretty big thing to have to deal with if you're handling HIPAA records. Because again, any point in time, somebody can come and say, I want to see everything that you've looked at, and everybody in your company who's looked at my data. Access to non-obfuscated data has to be restricted to what's called TPO, or treatment, payment, or healthcare operations. So you can't go into non-obfuscated EPHI data and just say, I want to start doing analytics on it. I want to go figure out cool things that I can sell you now. It's really only supposed to ever be to take care of your treatment, your payment, or internal hospital or healthcare operations. So if you ever think that somebody has breached your data, or you want to know who's looked at your data, go ask them who's seen it and why did they see it, and see if everything was for purely treatment, payment, or operations. So for analytics, we needed to encrypt the data. Some scenarios we needed fully obfuscated data that could never be reversed, so that we didn't have to worry about anybody ever being re-identified. And that's scenarios where if we want to do like large studies, some of the studies that we're helping a local university with are how people interact with certain heart medications and high blood pressure medications. So we don't ever need to get back to the individual for that. So in those cases, we can do a one-way encryption and throw away the key and just never go worry about getting back to it. Now others, we really need to be able to get back to the original person. So if we're looking at adherence and figuring out how do we do adherence, we might want to go, build the model, figure out, can we determine whether people are adhering, and if they're not, we want to take those people who are not adhering, re-identify them so that we can then work with somebody to intervene and try and help them to start to adhere with their medication more. So PII, there is currently no U.S. laws dictating the treatment of PII. We believe there will be, especially if we continue on the path we were down in 2014, and it looks like we are so far, of a breach a week. I think what was the latest one was the feds breached 4 or 5 million federal employees' information. So I think people are going to get tired of having their information being leaked by every big outfit out there and start to demand that something be done about that. And we kind of expect that when those laws start to go in place, they're going to start to mirror the laws that are in HIPAA as far as how you have to treat PII data. And some states are already there. I think California is probably a little more advanced than a lot of the other states out there. So we figured we may as well start treating PII data the same way now. So we treat all of our regulated data as if it was HIPAA data and keep it all fully encrypted, and don't let our data scientists actually look at the values that could identify somebody. All right, so the products that we currently have in production. The first one that we built was a targeted digital offers. And that's where, through our digital promotions network, where you have a virtual wallet in the cloud and you've clipped your virtual coupon. You go in and swipe your loyalty card, and at the point of sale, our software goes out and checks into the cloud and says, do you have any coupons? And if you do, it deducts them right there. And then at the end, it uploads your entire market basket. So we get the full transaction of everything you bought. So what we started doing with that was to basically kind of build a recommender engine that's kind of a hybrid of the Netflix model and the Amazon model, and then look at the offers that we have from consumer packaged good manufacturers and start to say, well, we think that these offers make the most sense for you. You buy Diet Soda a lot, so here's a coupon for Diet Soda. Or you buy Diet Coke a lot, well, Pepsi will give me a lot more money to give you a coupon for Diet Pepsi because maybe this will be the one time that you'll switch. So we've got that in the market with several retailers on the East Coast. Price optimization is another thing that we have worked on and started to get into production. So does everybody know what price optimization is? Does anybody not know? You can raise your hand. It's okay. This is a safe place. So price optimization is figuring out what you're willing to pay, what your threshold is. So let's say if you like bananas, but you only like them at $2 a bunch and less, and this guy will buy bananas at any price, then we can kind of figure that out, and then we can do targeted offers to you so that we can raise the price of bananas to $2.75, give you a 75-cent coupon, give you a 25-cent coupon. I've sold 2 bunches of bananas and made 50 cents more than I would have before. So a lot of our manufacturers and retailers are really interested in us digging in and kind of figuring out more about price elasticity. Upc Commonality Matrix is another one that we built because the business said, we've got to have this. This is going to be brilliant. This is going to let us sell a lot of stuff. I think they were incredibly disappointed when they finally saw the output of it because they all assumed that we bought ingredients together as we were going to make something. Like anytime you bought peanut butter, you would buy jelly because you were going to make peanut butter and jelly sandwiches, and they hadn't really occurred to them that maybe your peanut butter and your jelly don't run out at exactly the same time, so you buy those when they run out. But it's something we built, and it did give us some insight, or those of us who didn't already have that insight, into the fact that you buy stuff when it runs out, not when you're going to put it all in the same thing. Customer scoring is another thing that we have built, and it allows us to create kind of a matrix of customers and rank them and score them so we can helpfully tell a retailer who their most valuable customers are so that they can kind of focus on those people. Those are the people who come in more, spend more, have a higher profitability. I think they could probably rank the people who are the ultra couponers probably down towards the bottom because you don't make as much when you're bringing in your giant notebook of coupons. Although we love people to do that because that feeds the other part of our business. So products that we have in the pipeline right now. We have a clinical trial optimization. So there's a couple of companies that run clinical trials for pharmaceutical companies. And we are working with them to see if we can take claims data that we have and figure out who is going to be better at participating in a clinical trial than somebody else. And some of that stuff gets back to looking at adherence, as we discussed earlier. Because if you notice somebody doesn't refill their prescription every 30 days like they should, then maybe they're not really that trustworthy or as focused as you'd like them to be if they're taking a drug for a clinical trial that you're trying to run tests on. The patient engagement network is kind of a big thing that we have going on right now that we are really kind of gearing up to do a lot with. So one of the first things that we're looking at is healthy behavior modification. and that is basically looking at your market basket. Remember I said our software sends your entire market basket up at the end of the transaction. Well, we're figuring out how to apply a score to it to say how healthy your market basket is, which for the type A personalities, that's really going to drive them crazy if they get a B+ on their receipt instead of an A, so they'll go back through and shop again so that they can get an A on their receipt. But it's supposed to also give you recommendations and say, well, maybe if you had bought, product Y instead of product X, it would be healthier for you. So that's one thing that we're working on. Prescription adherence is a really big thing that we're working on. So a lot of the pharmacies and all the healthcare providers are now starting to move away from fee-for-service and are being held up to certain metrics to prove that they're actually making people healthier instead of just fleecing them for all the money they have. So again, we're looking pretty hard at how do we determine your adherence. We're also looking pretty hard at why you may not be adhering to your medication. We think that there's probably 3 major reasons. One of those would be price sensitivity or price elasticity. Another one may be the scary box that's on there that says if you take this, you'll die, possibly. So, and then the other one is you may have so many other meds that you're kind of confused about when to take what. So what we are going to try and do is use the same technology that we have that works with the point of sale now, or something very similar to that, and get that worked into the dispensing system at pharmacies so that we can have calculated a score about you, how adherent you are, why you may not be adherent, and have the pharmacist intervene at that point in time. And when you go to the pharmacy now, I'm sure they always ask you, do you have any questions for the pharmacist today? And how many people in here ever have a question for the pharmacist? Nah, nobody ever does. So we want to try and kind of flip that around so the pharmacist says, I want to talk to you about your health and what's going on, so that they can start the conversation from that direction instead of trying to get you to start the conversation. Prescription fulfillment is another one that we're looking at, which also gets into adherence a little bit. The prescription fulfillment right now is a $16 billion a year problem where prescriptions are called in from the doctor's office. They go straight to the pharmacy. The doctor says, what pharmacy do you use? And you say, oh, the CVS down the street, and they send it right there. And $16 billion worth of prescriptions don't get picked up every year. And I'm sure you've pulled up to get your prescription. You see those big bins that are just full of prescriptions, and a lot of those are just sitting there, won't be picked up. Then the pharmacist has to either take them out after 90 days and send them off to be destroyed or restock them or something. It's quite expensive, and so we're going to try and do the predictive analytics to figure out how likely it is that you will actually pick up your prescription, and work with the dispensing point of sale system so that as your prescription comes in from the doctor, if we don't think you're very likely to pick that up, then we'll just hold it and not let the pharmacist actually see it so they don't fill it, and wait until you actually show up, and then they can pull it and go, oh yeah, I see it, now I'll fill it. And then targeted offers is the other thing that we're going to be rolling into our patient engagement network, and that is, again, looking at some of your health data to determine what kind of offers we could send to you that might make you more healthy. So if we notice that you are a diabetic, then we might say, hey, here's sugar-free this, or Diet Cokes, or whatever, something that won't be as bad for you as the high-strength Coke or Mountain Dew, which is bad for everybody, I think. And then we'll also be able to tie into front of store, which is what the pharmacies really like, is that we can say, well, hey, go buy this stuff in the front of the store. Go buy your diet soda right here in Walmart while you're getting your prescription filled. It's over on aisle 3. Go get it now. And then the other thing that will help us with the prescription adherence is if we determine somebody is price sensitive to their prescription, if they get it filled every time that there's a $10 copay, but it goes up to a $20 copay, they stop getting it filled. A lot of the pharmaceutical companies have what they call copay cards. And we can alert the pharmacist to offer those copay cards to the people who are price sensitive and say, we think you're not taking your meds because you're worried about the money, so here's a card which will help you pay for the next 5 or 10 refills at a price that you feel comfortable at. And then one of the other products that we have in the pipeline right now is something called customer lifetime value, or the more horrible name for it is buy until you die. And that's where we try and figure out what is the most amount of money that we expect you to spend at a retailer throughout your relationship with the retailer, and then help them squeeze every last cent of it out of you. So that's what we're doing with Hadoop. That's how we got into Hadoop. If anybody has any questions, I'd be happy to answer them. Okay. If you could come up to the mic, that would be great.
So when your data scientists built these models, did you have any lessons learned or technical challenges in getting what they built actually deployed in production and working in a production environment on Hadoop?
Yes, we did. So we've had one statistician who is trying to build stuff purely in SAS and then go, all right, here you go, there it is in SAS, go make that go in Hadoop. That was not a whole lot of fun. We had to get some guys then go through and figure out what she did in SAS and then rewrite it into a MapReduce piece of work. I think, Jeff, correct me if I'm wrong, but when we did the Commonality Matrix, we had some problems getting it to scale as it was trying to go across all the UPCs, all the baskets ever. I think we had to go and write kind of a custom MapReduce job in Scala so that we could take care of the linear algebra that we needed to do in there. So some of them have been a little bit tricky, and we've definitely found that we need to have people who can get outside of just, I'm going to do it in Pig or Hive, or come up with something clever. That we need people who can write in Scala, who aren't afraid of getting down with Mahout and writing some Java code or some Python code. Yes.
How long did it take you to get your IT staff up to speed on the platforms and the problem solving and working with your data scientist team to actually get operational?
So that's assuming that we're already there, which now we are mostly. It's kind of an ongoing battle. So we've gone from, I think we started with HTTP 1.4 and have gone through several upgrades. It took about 4 months for me to do the research, kind of figure out what we were going to buy. We signed our first contract in March and had Hortonworks come on site, I think that May, and help us stand up the cluster and do an on-site 1-week training. It was kind of a mixture of development and administration. And then we had a couple of guys that were able to say, just, full-time, this is what you focus on now. And they were really good. So I would say within maybe, what do you think, 5, 6 months, we had stuff up. We were loading data. We were starting to get results out of it. And the team was feeling pretty comfortable with what they were doing. And that was with the administrator and our data engineer and data scientist all kind of working very closely together with few distractions. Yes?
You mentioned that you are using data warehouse in cubes and everything. So what is your experience on transitioning from that environment to Hadoop environment? Are you using both of them, or are you using one complete transition?
Can you repeat the first part? You're asking about all of the relational database systems?
Relational database, data warehouse, you mentioned that cubes and everything, how that transition is happening. You are using Cognos and everything.
Right, so we still have some of that stuff out there. We are system by system kind of going in and saying we want to change you to have more of a data lake instead of having your data marts where you're not getting very good answers. So one of the products that is about to go live is a rebates rewrite that we have, and those guys kind of got outside of the Microsoft stack mentality, which I was happy to see, and they're going to use Couchbase for their OLTP backend, and we're going to have that data replicated into Hadoop and into Solr so that they'll get their analytics dashboard just kind of built there for free for them. That's been the biggest challenge that we've had, is getting a bunch of hardcore Microsoft .NET developers to see that there's other things outside of the Microsoft world and that some of those things might be better. So that's going to be a kind of a gradual, ongoing effort. But as we see more and more of these applications pick up on the open source stack, we're seeing more momentum in the developer community to move that direction. Any other questions?
So then you have some visualization tools that are more traditional, but what visualization tools are you using on Hadoop?
So far, we haven't built a lot of data visualization tools on Hadoop. We have used it more as a data lake. So for these products that we're building, the commonality matrix and the targeted emails, a lot of that comes out of Hadoop and gets fed into another system. Like for the targeted email, that gets fed off to third-party emailers who will take the offers and all the email addresses and match them up and then send that out, and then they'll give us a feedback to say, here's how many were sent, here's how many were opened, how many clips you actually had. The other stuff is mostly feeding into other front-end pieces, so we're not really using HBase as a NoSQL store, and just having the stuff in HDFS or exposed through Hive doesn't make for a really good front-end experience. And most of the folks who want to go in and do analysis are using Hue right now, or we've given them the Beeline command line tool on a Linux box so that they can go in and start to run queries. But we are looking at, I think we're using Banana and Solr is probably what we'll start using and start to index data out of Hadoop so that more business users can start to do searches and aggregates that are fast and come up with a fairly decent GUI. We looked at Tableau and a couple of others, and I just didn't like the way the Tableau server portal worked. It was all very spreadsheet based, and you had to make a lot of spreadsheets and publish spreadsheets, and it just was kind of weird. We didn't like that. What was the other one we looked at? No, not Datamir. We have ClickView. That was one of the other things that we have. It was another one of the portals and build your own dashboards. And sorry, which one? No. Sorry, I can't remember off the top of my head. It's one of the bigger ones. But again, we didn't like them very much. They kind of came in and did a demo, and it was terrible. Any other questions? All right. Well, thanks, everybody, for coming out. I appreciate it.